A warm welcome to all the delegates here on this webinar. Our sincere thanks to all of you for having taken out the time to be with us. So let us today look at the requirements of the CISA. So this is a session on the basic introduction and for the preparation for the certification. So agenda in this 1 hour session would be, we would try to understand the CISA and its benefits. We will look at the CISA review manual 5 domains just to understand what are the domains. We will not go into detail of each and every domain in this session, but we'll have a general look at it. Then we will talk about the CISA exam structure, like how long is the exam, what is the duration, how many questions are there, and how it is structured. That's all we will discuss in that slide. Then we will also talk about why is it important to consider a CISA training before you attempt to take your exam. Then I will also share with you the CISA application. How once you have qualified your CISA exam, you have got your passing results, then there's a process of applying for becoming a CISA. So I will showcase the application requirements and what are the experience requirements that you have to submit at the time of submission of your application. And finally, we will talk about understanding the CISA questions, how one is supposed to read and understand the statement and the options given, and how we have to go about it. So for that, we will have one sample question also. And after that, we will close the session. So a very brief introduction about myself. I started my career with Government of India in the security services as a security services officer. Served the nation for about 11 years and then I moved on to the corporate sector. As on date, I am a qualified CISA and I am also qualified for data center related operations as a CDCS, which is Certified Data Center Specialist, CDCP, a Certified Data Center Professional, and CDFM, Certified Data Center Facilities Operations Manager. Apart from this, I also carry the certification as a lead auditor for ISO management systems, which one for the ISO 27001, which is Information Security Management System, lead auditor for Business Continuity Management System, BCMS, ISO 22301, lead auditor for QMS, ISO 9001, lead auditor for Energy Management System, 50001, lead auditor for 45001, that is Occupation Health and Safety Management System, and ISO 41001, recently been introduced by ISO in the year 2018. It's a facilities management system. For all these ISO management systems, I am involved as a lead auditor. I am involved in supporting the clients for the implementation of these management systems, and I am also involved in delivering the training programs for these management systems. So overall, my experience has been around data center operations, facilities and operations management of critical infrastructures, implementation of ISO management systems, and multiple audits, including information system and other process audits for the organization. Today, I carry about 30 years of total experience. As an auditor, I have covered more than 1400 hours, and as a trainer, I have covered more than 5000 hours. Now, to understand about CISA, first of all, let us look at ISACA, that is the body. ISACA was established 50 years back. It was established in 1969, and it was established by the group of people who understood that there was a requirement of a centralized source of information and guidance, especially because in those days the electronic data processing had started picking up, becoming more popular, and the future was to go to the electronic data processing way for your day-to-day corporate activities. Hence, the need for auditing this system was ascertained, and that is where ISACA started looking into it. Today, there are more than 145,000 professionals across 180 countries who have been benefited by ISACA programs and ISACA certifications. Right? And their exposure and experience spans across multiple roles, whether it is related to assurance or governance or risk or information security. Today, after 50 years of existence, ISACA is a name to be reckoned with. It is globally recognized and it carries a very high credibility. Right? Now, these slide I have taken directly from the ISACA website. So, as a certified information system auditor from ISACA, ISACA is the only organization which is offering this certification. ISACA in itself is accredited as a certification body by ANSI, and as on date, there are more than 151,000 CISA certification holders. And the people who have worked hard and gone for this certification, today they are considered to be in the topmost salary brackets. In US itself, a qualified CISA typically gets a package of more than 100,000 US dollars. So that is the kind of advantage we get. It is world renowned standard of achievement for all the people who are either into the field of auditing or controlling or monitoring or doing an assessment of the organization's information technology and business system. So as a CISA, you don't just have to be an auditor. You can utilize this certification in multiple ways in your roles. This entire CISA program has been curated by the industry experts considering all the domains which are involved into strengthening the information system of any organization. So there are 5 domains. First domain is information systems auditing process. Second domain is governance and management of IT. Third domain is information systems acquisition, development and implementation. Fourth domain is information systems operations and business resilience. And finally, the fifth domain is protection of information assets. So a person who's going to be a CISA in any organization, who's going to be a certified information systems auditor. So friends, please remember this here the IS stands for information system as a whole, not only for just information security. So that is why domain 5 only is related to the protection of information asset, that is the security aspect. All other 4 domains, they talk about other skills that a CISA needs to develop, the knowledge a CISA should have. So starting with your information systems auditing process itself, what is an audit, how to conduct an audit, right? Then how does a corporation or an organization has established its IT and how it is managing its IT infrastructure? What is the governance level? Is it leadership dominated or leadership oriented, or it is person oriented? What level of processes are there? Today, most of the organization are going to third party for getting information systems. So they acquire softwares, applications, or they develop themselves and then implement it. So whether you are developing in-house or you are acquiring it, both the scenarios need to be covered when it comes to the information systems management and auditing. Then how these information systems are linked and aligned to the organization's business operations, and how do they support an organization for developing a business resilience in case of any disruption of services. So, and depending on the need in any business, these domains when it comes to the examination have been given certain weightage. So as you can see on this slide, the information system auditing process carries a weightage of 21%, right? And protection of information assets carries the highest weightage of 27%. In between, you have governance and management of IT, 17%, information systems operations and business resilience, 23%, information systems acquisition, development, and implementation, 12%. So in your exam, the number of questions that would be asked, they would be distributed in these weightages. So is CISA right for you? The answer is a strong yes. Everybody, whether at the start of the career or at the middle of the career, you go for a CISA certification, it definitely enhances your value to your organization and it enhances your individual skill level as well. So, one, there is a pay boost. 22% people have agreed that after becoming CISA, they actually got the benefit of increments in their pay, and that was substantial. And 70% given the feedback that it also improved their on the job performance. So they were able to correlate to the information systems in a better manner and their individual performance improved, which led to their career growth. So for the CISA exam, CISA publishes a job practice. It is known as a review manual. Current review manual was revised and updated in the year 2019. Ever since the CISA started as a certification, there have been 27 revisions. So current revision is 27th edition of the CISA review manual. So as I was explaining in the previous slide, this manual contains the requirements and all the information related to the 5 domains. Right? So first domain is information system auditing process. Second domain, as we discussed, governance and management of IT. Third domain covers information systems acquisition, development and implementation. Information systems operation and business is the fourth domain, and the fifth domain, protection of the information assets. Now these 5 domains are covered as 5 respective chapters in this manual, and this is a product of very hard work by the people in the industry. The way it has been structured, every chapter, one, it gives you the exam content outline which you can expect from that chapter. Then every chapter carries notes on what are the learning objectives of that domain and what are the task statements. Now the task statements are basically, as a CISA under that particular domain, what kind of responsibility you will have to deliver, what are your responsibilities, what tasks you need to perform. So those have been very well specified in each and every chapter for each and every domain. Each chapter has been divided into 2 parts, part A and part B, and every chapter at the end of it will have a case study to ensure that whatever you have studied, you can now try to apply your knowledge and attempt the case study and the questions thereafter. Then, as an answer key to the questions of this case study, it is not simply that answer A, B, D, C, etc. is mentioned. So there is answer key is not simply the marking the answers. Every single option is explained why it is correct and why it is incorrect. So that enhances your knowledge further. So just to give you an insight, chapter 1 is on information systems auditing, right? So information systems auditing process. This is chapter 1. Part A of this chapter is dedicated to planning, and part B talks about execution. So when we talk about planning, we are talking about if you are going to conduct an audit of the information system, the whole auditing process needs to be properly planned. And then once your planning is complete, you need to execute on ground. So that is where part B on the execution comes into picture. So in the planning, they have covered the IS audit and the assurance standards against which the auditing needs to be done. What is the role of an IS audit function in an organization? How does an IS audit function supports the organization? Then what are the information systems control objectives? Now, we are not directly talking about the controls. We are first looking at the control objectives. A control objective is basically, why do I need to put a control in the first place? What is it that I am going to gain? Why do I need this control? And then only you decide on what would be the fitting control. So basically, you are looking at the risk assessment of your information systems. You are identifying what are the vulnerabilities, what are the threats, how it can impact your organization's operations. And basis that, you develop a control objective. So what are those control objectives that is being covered, and what could be the possible information systems controls that is also covered. Then the auditing as a process in itself needs to be developed on a risk-based audit planning, which means when we are planning the audit, we undergo a risk assessment of the whole process. What could be the risk to our auditing? Just to give you an example, we have appointed an auditor knows who is going to a regional area where he does not understand the local language. So there is a risk to this audit planning that there could be a communication gap and the audit results may be a little bit inaccurate. This is one of the risks. So this is thought during the planning process. Second risk to the audit planning could be non-availability of the audit at the time of audit proposed. Third kind of risk could be the skill level of the auditor appointed for the audit. Whether he belongs to that industry or not, does he understand the processes of that organization or not? So these are the very few examples which are related to the risk to the audit. So the audit planning in itself has to be risk based. Then this chapter part A also explains various types of audits and assessments. So there is a first party audit, an audit which is conducted by an organization for the organization. That's a first party audit. Second party audit is the audit which is conducted by organization A on organization B. It is usually related to the existing relationship between a supplier and the customer. So most of the time the customers would like to audit their suppliers before they join hands and also during the engagement period. In some cases, even a customer may request an audit, even a vendor may request an audit of the customer to assess whether this customer is having a healthy financial position or it is having the processes or not. So either ways, whether a customer is auditing the supplier or vendor, or a vendor is auditing the customer, it is a second party audit. And then there are third party audits, which are the audits done by independent entities or people. That means there is no relation between the auditee and the auditor. There is no business relation except for the contract of awarding the audit. So there is no relationship of being on the board of the organization or being one of the suppliers of the organization. It is a total independent body. So these kind of third party audits are conducted usually by the certification bodies to do the assessment and award a certificate to the organization. Or these are also sometimes conducted by the government bodies. Part B covers execution of the audit. Now that the planning is in place, you have identified what type of audit it is going to be. You have identified what are the risks that we have to take care of, and you have put in those control measures. Once you have identified what is going to be the criteria of this audit, now is the time to execute the audit. So execution is actually a project. So you have to do the audit project management. So that is why this elaborative planning has already been done. Now that when you go on site to start the audit process, we as an auditor start looking for evidences, the facts which are available to us, which are showcased by the audit. Now, these facts are the evidences which have been collected. At the time of collecting this evidence, we cannot say whether it is a supporting evidence or it is a non-conforming evidence. So we assess the evidence against the audit criteria. And that is what gives us the decision whether this evidence is indicating a conformance or a non-conformance. Then whatever data is being collected during the audit process, a proper analysis of that data is done and the conclusion are reached. And basis that conclusion, now a report needs to be submitted to the client or the auditee. So you will have to create a proper reporting structure, and it cannot be just a pass or a fail result. It is an elaborative process which talks about who was the auditee, who was interviewed, what documents were taken as evidence, what records were referred to as evidence, and what was the audit criteria, and for each criteria, what is the level of conformance. And after the report is submitted, there is a procedure for reviewing the audit by your peers so that in future you can improve the audit process itself. So it's a kind of a PDCA approach, plan, do, check, act. So it is applicable to the auditing also. So in the part B itself, after this execution content is over, there is a case study with some questions and explanation of the answers. As I said earlier, for each question being asked, whatever the 3 or 4 options are there, a proper explanation is given why option A cannot be correct and why option B should be correct. So that also helps us in understanding what to expect in the exam. Now let us look at the CISA exam structure. This exam is 4 hours exam. So that's a pretty long period, but that is a good period also. There are 150 multiple choice questions which one has to attempt in these 4 hours. This exam is proctor controlled. So whether you are taking this exam from your office or from your home or you are going to a test center, it will be totally proctor controlled to ensure the fairness of the exam. So you will be given a guidance by the proctor, and they will check your documentation identification, and after being assured that there is nobody to support you for the exam, we are not carrying any supporting material, then they will give a go ahead and release the exam. And please remember, this entire process of getting connected with the proctor does not get involved in these 4 hours. Our 4 hours to attempt the exam start the moment proctor releases the exam. And through your webcam, all your activities will be continuously monitored. The 4 hours that has been allocated to attempt these 150 questions is enough time. So we should not have any kind of anxiety. However, we must keep a watch on the time. The questions are usually case study based or a situation based, And it is not a right or a wrong answer type of a question. It is usually asking you to pick up the best of the scenario. So these questions are not designed to just assess your knowledge, that how much do you know or much do we know. These questions are designed to make an assessment how as an auditor you are taking a practical approach. So that is what is being assessed in this exam. And that is what makes this exam stand apart from many other certification examinations. When it comes to the scoring, unlike other examination where every question carries equal marks, some examinations carry negative marking also. This is the exam which does not have the questions distributed with equal number being allotted to each question. So different questions are assessed for different weightage. And after you have finished your exam, depending on the level of the difficulty of each and every question, the ISACA committee does a assessment on a scale of 200 to 800. So even though you have attempted 150 questions, your scoring can be anything between 200 to 800. So the scale score of 450 is what you need to reach. So once you score 450 and above, you become qualified not as a CISA, but to apply for the CISA registration. So how does training help us? Let us look at that. First, the CISA review manual itself. The manual which I talked about, it is the base for the CISA exam. That means every participant must understand the manual, must understand the content and the job practices mentioned in that. And it is very voluminous document, almost 980 pages it contains. So practically, when you will go through your review manual, you will find it is more like a textbook. That is what makes it a little bit difficult to just study the manual and attempt the exam. And that is where training comes into the picture, because there is a lot to comprehend. So once you have undergone the training and then you pick up your manual and do the self-study as a revision, it will definitely lead to a much better understanding of all the concepts and the requirements. So training in most of the cases is essential. Even the CISA exam questions, they are developed with the intent of measuring and testing your practical knowledge and application of the IAS audit assurance principles and the standard. So the training programs are developed with this structured approach, keeping this requirement of the CISA exam questions framing. So in the training program, every domain would be covered, looking at the need of the practice requirements as a CISA. During the training program, the trainer would be giving you practical examples which are not mentioned in the review manual, so that you can understand the concepts in a better fashion. Plus, the trainings, they involve the participants. It is not a monologue like a lecture. It is a dialogue among many people being together in the same training program, who will be able to correlate to the content and share their own experiences. So these training programs are highly interactive sessions, and whenever a session becomes interactive, it has got a long lasting impact, and it leads to easy and better understanding by everybody involved. And then the training gives you a direction for your preparation. After undergoing the training, now you can assess how much preparation do you need to do before you attempt your CISA exam and qualify it. So last but not least, training will always end up boosting your confidence. As I said earlier, it's a voluminous document which you have to refer to the CISA review manual. Exam is going to be prepared from that manual. So many people who go through that manual on their own, they start losing the confidence because they are not aware of certain domains. So training being a structured approach definitely help you to have a better confidence to appear for your exam. So after passing exam, what is it that you have to do? As I said, passing the CISA exam does not mean that I have become a CISA. It is the first step. So once your results are declared that you have scored more than 450 marks and you are now eligible, so you can apply to ISACA to be registered as a CISA. So that is the second step of the process that you have to go through. So for the latest updated eligibility conditions, you should always check ISACA official website. Please refrain from depending on any kind of blogs or information made available on the net by third-party organizations. Refer only and only to the ISACA official website because that is what is going to contain the latest and the updated requirements. So the process of CISA involves submitting your application online. So once you have got your results, you will go to your login credentials on the CISA portal. There you will download the application, fill it up and then submit it online. So I am going to showcase how it works. This is the latest CISA application on your screens. So it will carry your ISACA ID, your full name, your email ID and your contact number. So as a step 1, we pass the exam. Step 2 is to report our work experience. So as you can see on the screen, there is a column for your company name where you have worked, your engagement with that company with the start and the end date. It will automatically calculate the years and months. So you just have to submit your start date, end date, and that years and months calculation will happen by default. And you have to choose that during that particular assignment, which of the 5 domains you were involved. ISACA does not require that for each and every experience you should have been involved in each and every domain. So somewhere you might have been involved in the acquisition, somewhere you might have been involved into the protection of information system asset, somewhere you might have been the part of the governance and IT. So whatever is best that you can describe during your experience in that organization, you tick on that. And you can tick all 5 or any 1 or any 2 or any 3 or any 4. So be truthful and keep on adding your experience in this table. So once you have put in all this, it will calculate your experience for this section A. So that will come by default. Total experience that is required to be registered as a CISA is 5 years experience. Now many people have a question that they have got less than 5 years experience. Does it mean that they should not take the exam right now? The answer to that is no. You must take the exam now and when you are prepared. After that, your scores that you get, you need to have 5 years experience, that's right, but your scores are valid for 5 years, which means if you qualify in January 2022, then before January 27, you can apply for CISA registration any point of time. So if you are carrying 3 years experience today, You can qualify the CISA exam, have a valid score, and wait for 2 years before you apply for registration as a CISA. Another good thing is that ISACA allows you a waiver. It's an optional waiver. This waiver could be for your general work experience, or this waiver could be based on your education. So depending on the qualification you have, it is as mentioned on the slide. If you are having an associate degree, you can seek 1 year waiver. Right? You can seek a 2 year waiver out of these 5 years if you have got a bachelor's, master's, or doctorate degree in any field of the study. 3 years waiver for a master's degree in information systems or a related field. So, but how this waiver is going to be applicable? Please go through the ISACA website, understand what all evidences would be required to be attached along with the application form as a proof. Then here again you get your experience total. So your experience A, experience B, and experience C. If you're not taking any waiver, then only experience A would be taken into consideration. Total experience from all these sections need to be 5 years or more when you apply for the CISA certification. So along with this application, you also have to verify your work experience. That means whatever you have mentioned as a work experience in the section A, it needs to be verified. For that, you do not need to get an experience certificate from your organization and attach the PDF or the hard copy. The verification form is available within this application form. So that is on the next page. But before we go to the next page, please do remember that you have to sign this application form digitally. So you must create your digital signatures, sign the application with date, then forward this application to the person who is going to verify your experience. So this is a CISA experience verification form, very much part of your application form. So here your name would be there, your ID would be there, and in a row below would be the details of the persons who's verifying for you. So verifier's name, company name, job title, email, phone number, all that is required, and there would be verifier questions. So verifier will now verify that your experience given above, yes, you did work in that domain which you mentioned in the section A. The verifier gives a commitment here that he or she is attesting for the experience as well as for any waivers if you have sought, and he or she has to identify the capacity in which that person is verifying your application. Could have been your supervisor or a manager or even a colleague. Even your client also, if you're working independent or for an organization and there is a client for which you have done work in the field of auditing or implementation or anything related to IT and information system, even a client can verify your experience. So they also have to sign your application digitally along with the date. So once this application is ready with your signature, all the information and verifier signature, no other document is required. We do not have to prepare a CV or a resume to attach with. We don't have to seek an experience certificate from the organizations we are working with or we have worked with. This verifier submission is good enough. So then this application would be processed. ISACA at its own discretion may approach your verifier and validate. In some cases, they may not even approach, but that is the prerogative of the ISACA committee, which goes through your application. So we are almost coming to the end of this session. So let us understand the CISA questions, just to give you a fair idea. So I have picked up just one example here. I want you to spend 2 minutes and silently read this question. And you need not answer this question. Just read the question. Let me read the question for the benefit of all, even if you have read it. An organization performs a daily backup of the critical data and software files and stores the backup tapes at an offsite location. The backup tapes are used to restore the files in case of any requirement, right? So if the disruption happens, then the files can be restored from this backup. So is it a preventive control, management control, corrective control, or a detective control? As I requested you, no need to answer this question. Let us understand the question first. So before you choose your answer, and this is where the training is going to be beneficial to you. So before you choose, understand the options given. What is a preventive control? Preventive controls are those controls which are used to avert problems before they can occur. So that is prevention. A management control is a control which modifies your processing system so that the reoccurrence of that problem or the repeat occurrence of that problem is minimized. So that is a management control as per the definition. Then corrective control is a control which helps us to correct or minimize the impact of the problem. So once an issue has happened and we have implemented a control, either we are correcting the impact or we are minimizing the impact of the issue. A detective control is the one which helps us to detect and report problems as they occur. So I'll go back and repeat for one moment. Preventive control, which can avert the problems before the problem arises. Management control, used to modify the processing system so as to minimize the repeat occurrence. Corrective control, to minimize the impact or correct the impact that has happened because of the problem. And detective control is to help detecting and reporting the problem as and when they occur. So if an issue has happened, it gets detected through your detective controls. Now that you have understood these explanations of all the four controls, let us look at the assessment. So a preventive control, because it is a control implemented for averting the problem before the problem arises. So backup tapes cannot be used to prevent any damage to the file. So this answer is incorrect. Backup tapes are used for restoration. So taking a backup is not preventing anything from happening. The issue can still happen. Business can still get disrupted. The management control, it modifies the processing system to minimize a repeat occurrence. So taking a backup on a backup tape does not modify any processing system. So this will also not fit into the definition of a management control. So option B is also an incorrect option. So let us look at option C and D. A corrective control helps to correct or minimize the impact of the problem. So the backup tapes can be used for restoring the files in case there is an issue or a damage to the file, and thereby they would be reducing the impact of a disruption. Detective control, it helps to detect and report the problems as they occur. So backup tapes are not going to detect anything. So now that you have understood this, read the question again. I'll again put this for 2 minutes. Now is the time for you to identify the correct answer and do a self-assessment. Did you get the correct answer in the first attempt or only after getting this explanation? If you are getting this answer, the correct answer after this explanation, then it is self-explanatory how a training on CISA is going to support you. So I'm sure most of you are now able to understand that correct answer is C. It is a corrective control. We have taken the daily backup, which means we have a backup of 24 hours. The disruption can happen just 2 minutes after taking the backup, or disruption can happen after 23 hours 59 minutes of taking the backup. So the risk involved in the loss of data is only between 1 minute to 11 hours 59 minutes, because the moment 24 hours happen, the backup would be taken again. So in case of a disruption, we will be able to restore the files, thereby minimizing the impact, and hence it is a corrective control. So dear friends, with this I would end my session.